Chapter 50. One moment please, Tyson politely asked for a second as he patted around his robes as realization dawned on him. I forgot the papers. He whispered to Nessie. Nessie leaned in. Bahu. I don't remember what to say. Big brother said to write it down so I could study it, but I forgot it back home. Tyson looked like he was about to cry. All the while, both Ares and the demigods just stared at him, his low voice clearly heard by everyone present. Bahu. Nessie nudged him. Okay, I'll try. Tyson nodded, and then he did what his brother taught him. He stood up straight, letting his big stature cast an imposing image. This lowly Cyclops is Tyson. I have arrived to assist you, fellow Taoists. He looked at Nessie, and the sea creature gave him a nod of approval. Percy and the others looked between themselves. All right, Percy said casually. Hey, do you know my brother? 3 eyes, kind of goofy, likes to dress like a pimp. And he flies on a sword for some reason. Tyson's eye lit up. You know, big brother. He's my big brother. Wait, he's your brother too, does that make us brothers? Percy asked excitedly. Poseidon. He pointed to himself and then at Tyson. Tyson's smile grew big, and he nodded enthusiastically. I have another brother. Before Percy realized the implications, he had already been scooped up in a hug by Tyson. Seriously, you're doing this now? Ares asked in disbelief. Yes, your dumbass father fucks anything that moves, so you have a bunch of siblings all over the place. Is it really that big of a deal? Though, despite everything, he was still being rather casual, he was in no rush. However, Tyson and Percy sort of lost the brotherly moment as Tyson gently let him down, feeling awkward at that point. Bahu. Nessie bellowed, looking at Ares. What did you just say about my mother? Ares, eyes widened, taken aback by being insulted by a random monster that popped up. Holy shit, that's cold. Percy muttered. Nessie. Tyson covered his mouth, his young ears turning red at hearing such language for the first time. What the hell is going on? Can you actually understand that thing? Annabeth asked. It's a water creature, they're children of Poseidon, it's obvious they can understand it. And Ares is a god. Malcolm chimed in, giving his sister a disdainful look, wondering why it was such a weird concept to her. Right, you know what? I'm done. I was going to play around a bit, maybe let you twerps do a runner so I could chase you and have a bit of a laugh at your expense, but now I want some dinosaur sushi. He growled lightly. Not a dinosaur. Percy pointed out. Percy, you're not helping. Luke hissed under his breath. And that's my cue to end this little meeting. Ares snapped his fingers. Get them, boys. The surrounding bikers all pulled out their weapons and charged at the group. Fight. Malcolm yelled, drawing his own sword and charging at the nearest biker, cutting off his arm. He noted earlier that there seemed to be no blood or anything of the sort, but he didn't stop. Percy pulled out his pen, clicking it, and it transformed into his own sword as he quickly deflected a spear that was stabbed at him. Despite lacking experience, to him, the movements of the biker he was fighting seemed a bit slow. Luke's eyes widened as he saw how easily Percy and Malcolm took care of their first opponents. He had a smidge of trouble at the sudden sword being slashed at his chest, but as a son of Hermes, speed was his forte. He quickly slid to the side and swung his own sword up, locking it with his opponent for a moment before breaking his guard and kneeing him in the chest. The biker fell over, and Luke quickly stabbed him in the chest before rolling to the side as a spear narrowly missed his head. Annabeth joined him, jumping onto the back of one of the bikers attempting to sneak up on him, stabbing both of her daggers into his back, and making him fall over as she gracefully landed on the ground. Both Annabeth and Luke had trained and fought together multiple times at this point. Their coordination, while still a bit immature due to their age, was enough that they were able to take down several of Ares' henchmen in short succession. Quickly, bodies began to pile up on the ground around them as their breathing picked up, and their stamina was starting to take a hit. As Luke pulled his blade free from the stomach of one of the strange bikers, he shot Annabeth a grin as they had a moment to catch their breaths. Unconsciously, their eyes turned towards their companions, who had also been fighting a bit away. Annabeth was about to tell Luke that they needed to help Percy and Malcolm, but the words seemingly died in her throat. Percy and Malcolm were working together, if it could be called that, and there were perhaps 4 times as many bodies piled up around their area. Not only that, while they were clearly exhausted to the eyes of Annabeth and Luke, they were still able to go strong. Showing strength and speed that would have made most demigods in camp jealous. The two of them were confused, These two were new, they had just arrived in camp recently, yet why did it seem like they were the ones who lacked training? Not bad, kiddos, not bad at all. Ares gave a casual clap amidst the sounds of battle. Have to admit, I'd have thought you all would have folded by now, but I'm genuinely impressed. He still hadn't gotten up from his seat. In all truth, he was disdainful towards the idea of dealing with them himself. Likewise, as the god of war, he simply couldn't just snap his fingers to root them. It went against his pride and his divine disposition. Ares was the god of war, the aspect that represented bloodshed, violence, and death. The part that needed a fight to happen rather than winning through schemes or tricks. Not that he's incapable of the latter, but it went against what he stood for. As easily as he could have dealt with the kids, he was bound by his own nature to let them fight. Hermes brat, not bad. You've definitely been training that sword arm of yours. Even the little girl from my sister, you know how to exploit an opening. He praised them just as well as he would kill them when the time came. Barnacle Beard's kid, credit where it's due. I thought you were a complete novice, but look at you. If I wasn't going to throw you under the bus, I'd almost be impressed enough to grant you my favor. You're still utterly green, but by my father's beard, you got the instinct. Percy was nearly caught off guard by his words that one of the bikers he was fighting nearly ran him through. In that moment, Percy gathered the sweat from his body and splashed it over the visor of the biker, blinding him, and went low to slash at his legs. Ares wasn't even upset, he just nodded towards Percy for a good show. Lastly, his eyes landed on Malcolm. And you, I don't know what to say. Malcolm gracefully sidestepped a powerful spear thrust, and his sword quickly and precisely found the owner's neck with the barest effort before moving on to the next enemy. Definitely my sister's kid, but hot damn, that's some exquisite swordsmanship. Ares gave more genuine praise. The other three, I could accept, but who the heck are you, kiddo? Even your sister over there, I know her because she's the loudest of my sister's kids at camp. Even Hermes' kid too, he's the so-called head of his cabin, so I had an inkling of who he was before. But I have no idea who you are, and that's a bloody shame. Malcolm didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the collar of one of Ares' henchmen and swung his sword through his neck, severing his head. It would have been significantly more gruesome if there were actually blood or gore involved, but it was concerningly clean. Despite this, Malcolm tossed the head through the air, and it landed at Ares' feet. The god of war just let out a bark of laughter. Good kid, that's the kind of mentality you need when you're in a fight. Be graceful, be aloof, or be elegant if you want. But you need to know when to be savage. Ares grinned, stomping his foot on the severed head at his feet. The head dissipated into black smoke. Do you like to hear yourself talk? Malcolm snorted, letting out a breath as he jumped back into the fray. Yes. Ares didn't deny it. First lesson, kids, gods are capricious and proud. We're arrogant and self-indulgent. The smallest slight, well, we answer it tenfold, like this. He snapped his fingers, and the number of bikers doubled in an instant. Guys, they're not real. Malcolm called out. Some type of construct. They might have a weakness. Who? Maybe you're right. You got plenty to play around with to fight out. Ares taunted. You know what, let's add some more. Ares snapped his fingers again, and like that, a couple hundred more manifested around them. I'm a generous god after all. Bahu. Nessie retorted. You got some balls on you, seafood. Ares' attitude immediately did a 180 as he glared at Nessie. God damn, that was savage. Percy gasped, looking towards Nessie. However, Ares, while quick to anger, wasn't someone who acted irrationally in the heat of the moment like this. He preferred a slow and methodical grinding down of people who angered him. The god, though, was confused. He looked at Nessie and Tyson. Aren't you both going to help? Nessie also looked at Tyson. Tyson was just casually watching. I haven't been told what I'm supposed to help with yet. There seemed to be a moment where everyone just stopped, looking his way. Luke took that chance to grab Annabeth and jump over the heads of dozens of bikers and land next to Tyson and Nessie, and the two exhausted demigods nearly collapsed. Malcolm too saw the bad situation and grabbed Percy as the two managed to break through several of Ares' henchmen and took up position on the other side of the Loch Ness monster. Now though, there were hundreds of those bikers surrounding them, closing in slowly. Cyclops bro, mind lending a hand? Is this what you wanted help with? Tyson tilted his head. Yes, very much yes. Annabeth all but cried out. Oh, is the little baby monster going to join in? Have at it, big boy. Ares was still treating it all like a game. Let's see what you've got. Don't worry, I remember what Big Brother taught me for this. Tyson smiled happily, and he grabbed at the large sword sheathed on his back. Heaven bears witness. Tyson swung his sword horizontally, and a hurricane answered, sweeping up dozens of enemies and hurling them through the air. The demigods present, they all braced themselves as the turbulent winds nearly knocked them off their feet despite not being swept up within them. Everyone, including Ares, froze as the harsh winds subsided. The simple-looking Cyclops now having earned a new status in their hearts. The sunglasses on Ares' face nearly fell off before he caught himself. What the actual fuck? The god blurted out in absolute confusion and disbelief. Bahu. Oh right, I almost forgot. Thanks, Nessie. Tyson, oblivious to their stares, also had to do the most important thing. He held his sword in the right position, then posed properly as his robes billowed in the wind. Am I doing it right, Nessie? The Loch Ness monster raised her flippers in confirmation. I don't know what's going on, but I'm digging it. Percy was the first to speak up among their group. Thank you, senior brother. Malcolm called out. Senior brother. Tyson's eyes sparkled. Did you hear that, Nessie? I'm a senior brother now. I can't wait to tell. His words got cut off as a hand grabbed his face and threw him several feet across the ground. Ares had stood up, and clearly his patience had run out. I said I was done before, but now, I really am done. Alright, no more games. I feel like I'm getting treated as a joke. He cracked his neck. Malcolm was the first to attack, and the others quickly followed suit. His sword was aiming at the god's right eye, only to be casually flicked away without so much as a blink, causing Malcolm to go stumbling and falling to the side. Percy had tried to go low, aiming at his legs, but Ares gave him a hard kick that sent him sliding across the ground. Luke and Annabeth had tried to attack together, but he grabbed both of them by the necks and threw them just as easily as he did the others. No. Ares intoned as Malcolm tried to sneak attack him from behind. The god of war barely gave him a spare glance as he grabbed the boy's hand that was clutching the sword and then delivered a swift punch to the gut. Malcolm, who had been introduced into the path of cultivation, fell to the ground gasping as he felt like his chest had been shattered. Damn, you can take a punch, can't you? I thought I killed you there for a second. The god of war said casually as he then kicked Malcolm away, to the younger boy's continued painful gasps. Ares then casually brought his hand up to block a powerful stream of water aimed at his face. He sent an annoyed look at Percy, who was breathing a bit heavily, and then picked up the chair he was sitting on a moment ago and threw it with enough force that it knocked Percy up off his feet and into the air for a moment before he landed again, groaning, onto the ground. Don't bully them. Tyson roared as he got back up onto his feet and charged at Ares. The god of war scoffed, holding his hand out as he summoned his own sword, blocking the slash from Tyson. I admit, you got some power there, little Cyclops, I could almost feel that. He grinned. But this is far from enough. He twisted his hand and casually deflected Tyson's large sword to the side and threw a punch into his gut. Tyson nearly keeled over, but his teeth clenched and he refused to fall. He instead grabbed his sword with both hands and swung it at the god again. With as much power and speed as he could, he kept swinging. Each swing was met with a cataclysmic clanking of steel that echoed across the park. Each had enough force to shatter rocks, yet the god of war used one hand to block and didn't push back even an inch. Tyson slammed his foot down. His last swing, he gathered everything he had and swung his blade horizontally towards the god of war. Ares held his hand up and caught the sword. A moment later, as if catching up, an explosive sound of wind erupted, and hundreds of trees all around them had been cut cleanly in half. You know, you're not bad. You definitely got that spark that most demigods don't even have these days. But little Cyclops, I am a god. Ares scowled slightly and plucked the sword from Tyson's grasp, throwing it off into the distance. He followed it up with another punch, landing right on Tyson's cheek with equal if not more force than Tyson's swing just a moment prior. The sheer force was enough to cause an explosive eruption of wind that sent Tyson hurling across the park, hitting dozens of trees before his momentum finally stalled and he hit the ground. And now, it's your turn, Seafood. He looked at Nessie. Bahu. Nessie responded, and Ares' head snapped towards where Tyson had been sent flying. To Ares' honest surprise, Tyson came stumbling out of the wreckage of wood and stone that led deeper into the forestry area of the park. I won't let you bully my friends. Tyson shouted, running back at Ares. The god of war let out a small sigh and sent another punch at Tyson's gut, making him fall over this time. It was a nice effort. I'd be proud if one of my kids could do half as well, but know when to stay down. Ares raised his leg up and stomped on the back of Tyson's head, cracking the ground beneath them. Tyson tried to push himself up, but Ares just put more weight down, forcing him further into the ground. Bahu! Nessie roared at him. Ironically, the sect-protecting divine beast didn't actually have much combat capabilities. Ares scoffed, letting up on Tyson but kicking him away. The others were slowly climbing to their feet as well, and Ares just shook his head. You kids just don't get it, do you? I'm a god. Hey, is the reason that all your minions are fake because you don't have any friends? Percy asked. His legs trembled slightly as he did his best to stay standing. Quote. Really, Percy? Malcolm asked. What, can things get somehow worse? Percy returned. Fair. Malcolm nodded. You're right, I doubt he has any friends. The god of war felt his eye twitch, and a moment later he was grabbing both of them by the throats. Do you think you're special, that because you're demigods that I won't kill you? Demigod, monster, none of that matters, at the end of the day, you're still only mortal. And before a god like me, all mortals are just ants. Just as he said that, a flash of light soared across the sky. Ares' eyes widened, and he let go of both the kids and grasped at his sword again, summoning it in time to deflect the flash of light coming at him. The resounding clang sent the god of war skidding across the ground as the earth was split open. Who? The god of war exclaimed in surprise and anger, looking up to the sky. An ethereal voice carried over the horizon as all other sounds ceased. The imperial sword arrives with the wind, eliminating evil from heaven and earth. Mountains bow, seas part, and ghosts flee when the blade is drawn. With one eye I saw the truth of yin and yang. The Tao flows like tides through the universe, echoing an eternal melody. I am Ocean Song, the sect leader of the Sword Heart sect. Ocean Song lightly stepped in front of the others, the faintest whisper of the sole of his footwear touching the ground gave the signal that the world was allowed to utter sound again. Ocean Song's eyes met the god of war's. Fellow Taoist, I heard you say that all of mortal origins are ants. Ocean Song said with a frown as he raised his sword up, pointing it at the god of war. Today, I would like to see if I, with my mortal origin, look like an ant in your eyes. Line break. A.N. If you want to read one chapter ahead or support me, visit my page AStoryForOne. AStoryForOne. I also have a boosty if you can't use the above under the same name. 91 comments 0 vote. Chapter 51. Pimp, bro. Percy was the first to react to Ocean Song's arrival. Frankly, most of the kids were just too exhausted to even talk at this point. And Ares, contrary to his attitude moments prior, was uncharacteristically silent as he sized up Ocean Song. Percy, Tyson, Malcolm. Ocean Song smiled lightly as he greeted the ones he knew. It's good to see you three. He wasn't oblivious to their state, but he couldn't go over and fuss over them at the moment. Not with such a foe staring him down. Tyson looked worse, and anger bubbled up in Ocean Song's chest, but he forcibly pushed it back down for now. He knew his junior brother would be alright, beaten and bloodied, he would heal. For now, he was able to stand back up, and he was still breathing, it was enough. Bahu. And you too, of course, Nessie. Percy, having gained a second wind, was about to open his mouth again, but he noticed something odd about his brother. His clothes looked singed, burned in some places. Not only that, but when his brother's robes billowed, despite there being no strong breeze, he could see some charred and blackened skin on his arms. I apologize for arriving late, I came as soon as I found out. Ocean Song stated, his eyes never leaving the god of wars. He had become accustomed to having his divine sense sweep out periodically while he was carrying Lyra across the country. He noticed the commotion from dozens of miles out and flew here as fast as he could, ignoring everything else. The sky was not accommodating. You all did well, allow me to take things from here. Ocean Song declared. Towards the south exit of this park, there is a young girl waiting, please take her with you. They're not going anywhere. Ares spoke for the first time, though he didn't focus on the kids behind Ocean Song. He snapped his fingers, and a great many more of his bikers appeared out of black mist, surrounding them all. To be honest, Ares didn't really care about the kids anymore. Well, he just needed one or two to stuff the bag of stolen goods in their hands. But otherwise, they were utterly insignificant. He only spoke up just now because he felt challenged and responded in kind. Someone didn't get to come around and tell him what to do. In that, he told the kids to leave. I didn't allow them to leave. Ares said plainly. Ocean Song didn't respond immediately, instead, he looked up at the sky. A raindrop fell down and splashed across his cheek. In one fluid motion, Ocean Song raised his arm out, extended fully as his sword hung in the air, parallel to the ground. Ares tilted his head slightly in confusion. However, Percy saw it clearly. The churning of his divine blood resulted in him feeling it before it happened. A single drop of rain seemed to fall from the sky, different from the others. It landed at the tip of Ocean Song's sword. Against all logic, it was loud enough to be heard by the naked ear as it plopped against his weapon. A blue hue enveloped his sword, and with a flick of his wrist, the single raindrop turned into hundreds of tiny needles and shot off at each and every summoned minion of Hades. The kids only felt a faint wisp of wind pass them by as every biker fell simultaneously. Fellow Taoist, you were saying. Ocean Song looked back at Ares. Ares narrowed his eyes. It was rare for him to be so insulted openly like this. Yet he didn't act out of rage. It was equally rare that Ares had an opponent he recognized as worthy. However, there was one prevailing thought within his mind. As much as he would love a bloody fight to the death, he had a job to finish. I couldn't tell before, but you're something special, aren't you? Ares examined Ocean Song properly this time. You know, there are rules. Gods have to limit themselves. We can't just go around killing brats as we like. But there's an exception to that, did you know? When we're challenged. Oh, if it's one of the brats, I'd still have to hold back. But when a monster challenges me. His lips slowly pulled into a big grin. Well, let's just say that I don't have to hold back as much. There was a simple answer to all his problems. He could get everything he wanted and not have to deal with the annoying kids anymore. At the very least, he couldn't let them run away. At best, he could still just blame them and say something like, they got caught up in a fight he couldn't hold back in. Hey kids, have you ever seen a god's divine form before? Ares laughed, and the skin on his face cracked as a baleful red hue shined outwards. Ocean Song's eyes widened. Close your eyes. The world was filled with a crimson hue, and the kids screamed. It was barely a glimpse, yet their eyes were burned away completely. They all fell to the ground, clutching their faces, crying out, and wailing as they thrashed on the ground. Domain expansion. All things in this universe are equal. For the kids, the searing pain that went down to their very souls abruptly dissipated. The feeling of their eyes quite literally melting out of their sockets had likewise disappeared. That agonizing pain was seared into their minds but only lasted a brief moment. They hesitantly opened their eyes to realize they could still see, that they still had eyes. What surprised them the most wasn't this, though. It was like the world was split into two. Below them, a black and white symbol rotated, surging with power. All around them, it was as if they were at the center of the universe. Ocean Song stood in front of them protectively, shielding them from the might of Ares' divine form. They can barely see it opposite him. The crimson light, vaguely in the form of a person, was pressing down all around them, but it couldn't reach them. The true form of a god is not something a mortal should behold. Ocean Song stated, as he knew they were confused as to what just happened. When they glanced up, they saw it. Ocean Song's eyes were closed, and blood dripped down his face. Pimp bro, your eyes, Percy whispered. Ocean Song just smiled. Watch, this is a rare sight. It is not simply a battle of power, but a battle between our Tao. Ocean Song didn't explain. His Tao of yin-yang, to balance the universe, there is always a cost. To remove one's suffering is to take it upon yourself. The divine power of Ares continued to press down like a mountain, yet the world around them was unwavering. They could see the vibrations, the subtly shifting of the stars around them, yet there was no sign of it collapsing. My heart, unwavering. Ocean Song declared, taking a heavy step forward. My Tao, eternal. His domain pushed back, pressing back against Ares. Equalize. As soon as he declared the word, the world around him shifted again. The Tai Chi on the ground spun rapidly, swirling together all the errant energies. Like an all-consuming vortex, it swallowed up everything around them as it shrunk continuously until it landed into the palm of Ocean Song's hand. He looked up at Ares and smiled as he pushed it forward. The Tai Chi collided with the god of war's divine form, and the unbelievable happened. His all-encompassing divine nature was forced back, snapped back into place. Forced back into its normal container. Ares didn't have a spare moment to understand what just happened. His body arched, and the power sent him hurling backwards away from the group, disappearing from sight. Go, flee now. Ocean Song stated, gesturing to them. Nessie, watch over them. The kids didn't have any time to process, as if their legs carried them without their brains' orders. Ocean Song nodded to himself as the kids disappeared from sight, running the opposite direction as the very angry tremor in front of him. An angry god returned at this point. Ares slammed into the earth in front of Ocean Song, who didn't even react as pieces of earth flew past him. Ares was having trouble finding the right words. It was rare for a god like him to be dumbfounded. You forced me out of my divine form. The words were laced with both anger and confusion. At this point, he wasn't even looking at the group running away. At best, you're a minor god. Ares honestly couldn't tell what the fuck Ocean Song was. Was he a god, a minor god, or something close to it? That's impossible. He hissed. I am an Olympian. I wonder, fellow Taoist. Do I still look like an ant in your eyes? Ocean Song asked. My Tao is yin-yang, universal balance. Balance is achieved through the principle of equalization. You are invited to evaluate my Tao, fellow Taoist. Ocean Song casually put a hand behind his back as the other held his sword at his side. Ares was still confused. He had no idea what Ocean Song was even talking about, but it sounded insulting. He clenched his teeth, glaring towards Ocean Song. Whatever you did, you can't do it again, can you? You're not feeling too hot now, are you? To balance heaven and earth, one must bear the weight of both. Ocean Song didn't deny it. He had made use of his Tao far beyond what his cultivation base should have allowed for. He wouldn't be able to use his domain expansion for the time being or for a period in the future. His opponent was stronger than the last. However, his cultivation was also higher than last time. One should not underestimate the power increase that a minor realm brings. The Ocean Song of the middle stages of the nascent soul realm would convincingly defeat his early nascent soul realm self. The most important benefit, of course, was his increased Tao insights he had gained, but he was still not at the Tao-seeking realm. And truth be told, he only forced Ares back to his normal form for a small period. At the cost of not being able to utilize his domain for perhaps a few months and a significant portion of his stamina and chi, he could only force Ares back for maybe 10 minutes, at best. The only reason it worked so well was because Ares didn't expect it and heavily underestimated Ocean Song. All these concepts allowed him to perform a feat far beyond his cultivation level, but at great cost. You're still an insignificant ant. Ares growled and lunged at him, sword in hand. Ocean Song deflected his slash, with a shockwave erupting at the collision of weapons. It caused the nearby trees and the earth beneath their feet to become uprooted and blown away. However, Ocean Song frowned because he knew he lost in power in that exchange even if he deflected it. The god of war was no weak foe. Each of his attacks threatened heaven and earth. Ocean Song kept up as best as he could, each cataclysmic collision turning the park into a barren wasteland. I have to admit, monster. Ares' grin turned maniacal as he slashed again, cutting a huge gorge into the earth below them. I didn't expect you to be this skilled. I can see where that other brat learned from. Ocean Song sidestepped it, using the most minimal energy needed to dodge, and gathered his chi, thrusting his blade back. Ares raised his blade to blade it, and he let out an audible oof as it impacted, but he barely skirted back a few steps before just continuing to grin and charging back at him. And fighting me while blind too. Ares managed to draw blood on his next swing, a shallow wound across his chest. Ocean Song's eyelids were still shut tight. He frowned and grabbed his blade with both hands, putting in a large amount of his chi reserves to swing downwards. Ares braced himself, as with another cataclysmic booming of steel as the two weapons met, the ground under Ares' feet cracked and shattered. Oh, what's wrong? Touch a nerve. Ares laughed, having the time of his life. He grabbed Ocean Song's sheathed sword barehanded, something he wouldn't have thought twice about, but he was momentarily surprised that it still cut into his palm. But he still pulled it forward and slammed his head into the Cyclops. Ocean Song stumbled back but quickly regained his clarity. Ocean Sword, first form, crashing waves. Ares' eyes widened as his own godly power surged out to meet it. It was like the world was split again into a red and blue as the two powers collided. Even the seal above them that Ares placed to keep out eavesdroppers of a divine nature began to tear at the seams. The ripples of the two sides caused even the storm clouds above to split down the middle. His blade slashed through the attack, but he couldn't negate all of it as it slammed into his chest. The god of war was knocked backwards, hitting the ground a few times before rolling to a stop. However, he was far from out. He barely stayed down for a second before climbing back up to his feet. Ares looked down at his blade, shattered at the hilt, and unconsciously he threw up a mouthful of divine blood before wiping his mouth. The golden ichor that was his godly blood caused the ground to sizzle, as it contained his bloodlust. Nice hit. Ares breathed out. I feel like I can get serious now. He tossed away the shattered blade and called out a much more menacing spear. It radiated blood and death, and countless numbers of lives had been lost to the weapon. Around his body, an equally baleful and menacing armor enveloped him, black and red that glowed with divine light. Ocean Song was breathing heavier. He was already nearly running on empty. It wasn't merely just armor and a new weapon he held. His power had increased noticeably, as if he was straining his vessel to its utmost limits. This wasn't like Thor, who used a full attack at the limits of his vessel without assuming his divine form. This was Ares pulling in every ounce of power he could without his current vessel popping immediately, even if it began to fray at the seams. Ocean Song barely had time to react before an armored-covered knee slammed into his face. As painful as it was, he gritted his teeth and swung his entire body to dodge a spear thrust that followed it up. His instincts had him swing up his sword to deflect another, barely parrying the spear away from his face. He was seeing through his divine sense, but it felt like his divine sense was starting to fizzle as well. It was making it harder to keep up. An armored fist connected with his cheek, but he threw his own punch, his own having much less of an effect, barely phasing the god of war while he was thrown to the ground. A swing of his spear collided with the half-prone Ocean Song, lifting him up off the ground and sending him tumbling across the scorched and barren earth. Ares whistled as he walked towards the spot Ocean Song's body had landed. The Cyclops pushed himself back up to his feet, sword in hand as he swung it defiantly. Ares was genuinely surprised that he still had to block it, but he casually pushed it to the side and swung the butt of his spear at the side of Ocean Song's head, knocking him down again. You see now. Ares Song knelt down, talking rather calmly despite everything. Alright, maybe you're not an ant, but it's all the same. He swept his arms around. I'm still a god, you're small brat. Do you want to know how the gods see you and all those like you? We don't. You're a tiny grain of sand in a desert, barely even worth acknowledging. Alright, you're a slightly bigger grain of sand, but that's it. He spoke Ocean Song with the butt of his spear, particularly hard, with a bit of a sadistic grin on his face as he did. What? Got nothing cheeky left to say? No more random bullshit you want to throw out? Ocean Song looked up, and in one fluid motion, he threw a punch at the face of the god of war. Ares was going to slap it away casually, but a surge of power erupted around Ocean Song. The god of war saw his third eye open, and suddenly his power increased dramatically. He was taken off guard as Ocean Song's fist met the side of his helmet, lifting Ares up off the ground and sending him flying away. He had been hiding the trump card of his to land a solid blow. Ares felt his head jumbled for a moment but stood back from him. There was now a newfound dent on his helmet, making him look rather comical, as it plainly showed the outline of a fist. Ocean Song let out panting breaths, followed by a mouthful of blood as he wobbled to his feet. Even if a pearl is the size of a grain of sand, it can still shine radiantly. He stood up straight. I'm small. Then allow me to rectify myself in your view. Once more, a Tai Chi symbol expanded out of Ocean Song. It wasn't his domain but an expression of his Tao. One thought splits into yin and yang. Even if there were another one of you, I could fight you both at the same time. He declared as a second Ocean Song appeared opposite him. One of yin, one of yang. One housed his demon nature, the other his divine nature. What? Ares was taken aback again, but the demonic Ocean Song launched itself at him, carrying the full weight of his demonic strength. Ares felt the full force of his physical might as demonic Ocean Song's fist landed on the chest of his armor. The other Ocean Song didn't stand to the side, he was already behind Ares, swinging his sword down as a crashing wave slammed into the god of war. Ares let out a roar as he felt the blade push through his armor and into his skin. He grabbed the demonic Ocean Song, throwing him to the side, before spinning his body and hitting the sword-wielding Ocean Song with the shaft of his spear. But just as quickly they jumped back at him. Demonic Ocean Song grabbed him from behind, holding him in place. The other Ocean Song shot at him, thrusting his sword at his heart. Ares scoffed, elbowing the demonic Ocean Song, causing his face to splatter with blood before throwing him at his copy, knocking the two of them down. Take my Super Dragon Fist. Demonic Ocean Song roared, reeling his fist back, only to throw a kick. Ares, momentarily stunned, missed the sword quite literally thrown at his head. Not sharply, it spun through the air, the The hilt smacked his helmet with enough force that it whipped his head back and stunned him physically for a single breath. The kick landed on his chest, and he felt the vibrations through his armor and into his stomach. The other Ocean Song recovered his blade before it hit the ground and slashed down the back of the god of war. Ares let out a howl, divine blood splattering outwards. With a roar, his divine power erupted outwards. Both Ocean Songs couldn't dodge it in time, and they felt the full force of his divine nature slam into them. Divine Ocean Song found himself on the ground some dozens of yards away, his head spinning as he reoriented himself. He tried to stand up, but he fell over, his legs wobbling a few times before he could regain his footing. He could see his other half still throwing itself at him. He was about to rejoin the fight, but he looked down at his feet and saw something strange. Why was there a bag here? How did a bag survive the battle so far? This place was quite literally a wasteland at this point, yet there was still a fully intact bag. Ocean Song picked it up. Ares paused, feeling a strange sense of foreboding. He didn't even look as he dodged another punch and simply grabbed demonic Ocean Song by the face and slammed him into the ground. His gaze then landed on the other Ocean Song. Put that down, Ares said firmly. Ocean Song looked up at Ares, not putting it down. What's inside? Nothing. Ocean Song opened it and pulled out Zeus's divine weapon. The famous lightning bolt, the weapon that made nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. Ocean Song now held it in his hand. Quote. Quote. Ocean Song pointed it at Ares. Don't. The world then became filled with lightning. It was hard for either of them to tell what happened. In fact, both Ocean Songs snapped back together as they were originally. He could faintly recall his demonic half getting completely eviscerated by lightning. The sky above them for miles had been cleared. The ceiling around the area had been completely destroyed as well. Ocean Song was only faring well because he had unleashed it, but despite that, he felt his arms numb, barely able to even lift them. Finally, he raised his head, his weak divine sense swept out, and he could faintly see Ares still there. Standing would be generous. He was barely on a knee, most of his armor had been utterly destroyed, his body cracked and charred, and his spear was nowhere in sight. You bastard. Ares breathed out, throwing up a mouthful of blood. Funnily enough, they were both about equal now. Ocean Song praised his own Tao for letting him bring the god of war down to his level. As much as he wanted to lift up the lightning bolt again, he feared he didn't have the strength to wield it even partially without dying completely. The two of them, strangely, didn't need words to be said. The fight hadn't ended. They were both ready to fight to the end. However, Ocean Song's gaze turned slightly, confusion warped his face, and Ares must have noticed it as well. Well, he noticed Ocean Song turning his attention away and also the large shadow looming over him that suddenly appeared. Ares turned his head to see Nessie staring at him, and she was holding something in her mouth. What the fuck? Ares blurted out. Nessie spit Hera's golden apple tree on top of him. Bahu! She cried out triumphantly before disappearing. Ares confusingly looked around, then looked at Ocean Song. Quote. Quote. Don't. Great goddess Hera. I found your golden apple tree and the thief who stole it. Ocean Song yelled at the top of his lungs. Without a moment to prepare, a very angry gaze now turned towards him, and it narrowed in right on Ares with the proverbial hand in the cookie jar. Ares. Hera roared from Mount Olympus, enough to shake the world around them. Ares wasn't sure what was higher at this point. The hate he felt towards Ocean Song or the fear towards Hera. No, that wasn't right. He realized the answer to that question immediately. It came with the hand of his mother reaching through space to grab him by the throat. His mother, he feared his mother much more right now. Line break. A.N. It was completely calculated and planned, like a proper cultivator does. If you want to read one chapter ahead or support me, visit my page AStoryForOne. AStoryForOne. I also have a boosty if you can't use the above under the same name. 111 comments 0 vote. Chapter 52. There was nothing graceful about the arrival of the Queen of Gods. Nor was it expected. It was rare, even at the worst of times, for a god to directly appear like this. Even Zeus would have waited for the questors to return his lightning bolt had it been found and acknowledged by everyone. But Hera came in like a godly wrecking ball. Both Ocean Song and Ares were knocked off their feet as she landed between them, having shot to their location all the way from Olympus. Mother. Ares blurted out with clear fear in his voice. There was a beat of silence as the dust settled and the Queen of Gods stood there between them both. The two who had been fighting ruthlessly were now barely even able to stand up themselves. There he is, that's the person who stole your tree. Ocean Song immediately pointed at Ares. Oddly, the god of war shot Ocean Song a betrayed look. Ares. Hera's voice was calm, far too calm. The god of war gulped audibly. He's lying, he said, with the literal tree pressed down on top of him. He also stole Uncle's lightning bolt and Uncle Hades' helm of darkness. Ocean Song held up the two items. Hera's head snapped towards Ocean Song, mostly because she didn't know about the helm of darkness. He's lying, look, he's holding them. He's trying to blame me. Ares quickly made up a lie to defend himself. Hera frowned, looking between Ares and Ocean Song. How despicable, trying to blame an infant. The Cyclops spat back. Infant. I was born within the last few months. Ares, jaw hung open in confusion. Hera, to her credit, also did a double take, looking at him. And with her domain of childbirth, she could see that he, in fact, was born within the last year. Which was also rather startling for her. Ocean Song recognized the precarious situation. It was life or death. Despite doing his best, he knew that she would be less likely to believe him, a mere Cyclops, over a god, and subsequently, her child. Therefore, he was going to invoke his final trump card. True cultivators have no shame. Ocean Song plopped down on his butt and immediately started crying. Dodd. Once more, Ares' jaw hung open wide as he stared at the person who had been fighting him to the death just moments ago. Somewhat successful, too, in his opinion. It was rare for a mortal to put up that kind of fight. He would have maybe been angrier had he not felt Poseidon's gaze land right on him. He's trying to frame Percy for stealing all the things to start a war. Ocean Song pointed at Ares, noticing his father's direct gaze landing in the area. Bullshit. He also called you a slut and said that you had crabs. Ares jerked his head because he really didn't actually say that. Oh, you motherfucker. Before another word could be said, both Ocean Song and Ares felt a firm, and not quite so gentle, hand grab them. Next thing Ocean Song knew, he was on the marbled floor of Olympus. He looked up to see all the gods present in the very throne room by which the gods decide the fate of the world. Ares, however, was not present amongst the gods. In fact, he realized almost immediately that there was a force keeping him from sitting in his own damn chair. He glanced at his mother, who glared at him, and he understood who was doing it and thus kept his mouth shut. Without hesitation, and without a single beat passing, Ocean Song was already on his feet, hands clasped behind his back, bowing towards them. Greetings to the righteous gods of Olympus. This lowly Cyclops is unworthy to stand in the presence of this august assembly, but I am honored nonetheless. Ares' eyes dilated slightly as he stared at Ocean Song again, being once more taken off guard by how utterly shameless he was being. Literally crying for his dad a moment before, now he stood there, beaten and bloodied, but looking heroic and regal. Ironically, Ocean Song's words hit a certain chord with the gathering of gods. They always liked it when mortals knew their place. His immediate show of bowing and polite greetings won over their initial neutral perceptions rather quickly. Enough. Zeus waved his hand, calling the meeting to order. Ares, what did you do? His eyes narrowed at his son. The evidence, of course, was brought along. The tree was sitting there on the marbled floor, along with the lightning bolt and the helm of darkness. The latter of which was not lost on the assembled gods. I didn't steal them. Before anyone could respond to his denial, the room was filled with an eerie darkness. Brother. Zeus's words, light in delivery, were once more accompanied by a faint boom behind them. Zeus. Hades greeted back, the god of the underworld stepped upon Olympus. I've come for my helmet. Your helmet. The king of gods' eyes narrowed. Why is it that you never reported your symbol stolen, brother? Since when do I have to explain my actions to you? Hades scoffed, and everyone could feel the tension build up. Immediately, Zeus' paranoia was getting the better of him. He already was thinking of many different scenarios in the back of his mind that had his brother in an unfavorable light. If I may speak, O righteous king of gods. Ocean Song's voice carried between the tension in the air. All eyes landed on Ocean Song. Ocean Song cleared his throat. This lowly Cyclops dares not speak out of turn, but I wish to convey important information related to the discussion. Let him speak. Hera said firmly. Zeus frowned but gestured for him to continue. I was sent on a mission to retrieve Uncle Hades, helm of darkness and the stolen items. Ocean Song said quickly, making Hades blink. He paused for a moment before continuing. Uncle Hades, seeing the tension brought about by the missing lightning bolt, feared the growing unease between family after having discovered his own symbol stolen. He didn't believe that my father, Poseidon, was the thief, and thus he sent me to find the culprit and return the stolen property. Hades, for his credit, didn't immediately call Ocean Song out on his bullshit. Uncle Hades said that he didn't want to see his brothers fighting, so he made his own arrangement. He finished. There was a moment of silence as the king of gods scrutinized him. Likewise, Poseidon wasn't really buying it either. It's a warming thought. But evidence is required to back such claims. Athena spoke up. There was a round of nods. I swear on the river Styx that Uncle Hades sent me on a mission, and he told me to retrieve the stolen items. Ocean Song declared, and a boom was heard about them. I invite the great goddess Styx to proclaim my truth or deceit. Before anyone could raise a voice, the goddess Styx's voice was heard all around them. Truth. It was a single word, but it carried with it undeniability. It certainly startled the gods there, especially with what happened earlier regarding Styx. No one wanted to call her out or question her. Among the gods present, only Athena picked up on the nuance, raising an eyebrow as she looked at him. The others, distracted enough by everything around them, seemed to focus almost entirely on the contents beforehand. Brother, Zeus said with a strange softness to them. It seems I misjudged you. I apologize. Hades took a moment to stop staring at Ocean Song as he realized that technically everything he said wasn't wrong. He did send him on a mission, he did tell him, if vaguely, to retrieve his stolen helmet if possible. And he also said some vague thing about not wanting his brothers to fight because it was annoying. Yes, well. Hades coughed awkwardly, knowing when to take a win when it's given. It has been chaotic recently. I believe it's clear that my son isn't to blame then. Poseidon took the opportunity to help as well. With Hades' admission, he was crucial in retrieving the stolen items. And it certainly sounded factual. Are you seriously going to believe a monster over me? Ares shouted. That did snap some of them back to their senses a bit. It was hard for them to believe a monster over one of their own. Pridefully, it would be putting a monster's word over that of a god. Fellow Taoist, there's an easy way to solve this dilemma. Simply give an oath that you stole no items and have no intention of framing others for the stolen items. Ocean Song pointed out. Quote. Ares, unsurprisingly, didn't have much of a rebuttal for that, which was noted by those around them. Ares. Hera's eyes narrowed. I too would like to hear you say that you had no hand in stealing my symbol, nephew. Hades added. Ocean Song realized it was the perfect time to play his final card, seeing that Ares was stumbling here. If I may speak again, great gods. At this point, they were much more open to him speaking in their presence without invitation. Speak, son. Poseidon answered this time. You have something else to add. Yes, father. You see, it wasn't coincidence I happened upon the thief at that moment. I came because I saw Percy and Tyson being bullied, along with a child of Athena and Hermes. I, of course, did my best to rescue them. They can corroborate my claims that Ares attempted to frame them for the theft in order to start a war. Ares' eyes widened, and he looked like he wanted to tackle the Cyclops, but a quick clank of Poseidon's trident caused Ares to get swept up by a wave of water and thrown onto his chair, unable to move. That sounds like a wonderful idea, son. Now, where? Before he could finish, Hera disappeared in a flash, and a moment later, Percy, Tyson, Annabeth, Lyra, and Luke were unceremoniously plopped onto the floor. They're present. Hera said calmly. In a different situation, they may have chided her for her direct intervention, but all the gods held their tongues. They were already happy that Hera wasn't having another tantrum at the moment. Who the hell? Ow. Mr. Ocean. Lyra ran up to hug Ocean Song before realizing what was happening. Ocean Song, of course, held her happily as the others gained their bearings. Silence. Zeus didn't want to hear their prattling. All the kids immediately shivered in fear as they gazed around. You have been summoned before the gods to explain yourselves. Zeus cut right to the point. Give them a chance to catch their breaths, Zeus. Poseidon interjected. Apollo, can you heal them, please? All of them could see that they weren't in the best shape. Am I allowed? He looked around, because this wasn't exactly something they gave a free pass to. Hurry up. Hera answered before Zeus could, but he didn't argue with her. Athena cleared her throat. They should be presentable before the gods. She gave a quick reasoning so as not to make things awkward in the future. Apollo just nodded, using his domain of healing to quickly mend them back to their normal states. Fine, now explain. Zeus demanded. What occurred with Ares and the stolen items? Percy looked between them awkwardly. He attacked us out of nowhere and said he wanted to give us the bag of stolen stuff so he could get out of trouble. If Ares could speak right now, he would be shouting in his defense. But a rope of water was currently wrapped tightly around his mouth. Poseidon was not happy about the way Ares treated his sons, and while he couldn't do anything particularly egregious, this was something he could get away with. Daughter. Athena spoke up. Annabeth whispered. You as well, explain what happened. We were driving westward when we were attacked. We were brought to a park, unconscious, and that's when we met. She glanced at Ares, and Athena just nodded, not needing her to elaborate there. Percy said the truth. He wanted us to take the blame, and he mentioned that he wanted Percy specifically to be holding the stolen items because he hoped it would start a war because of who Percy's father is. A lot of eyes in the room looked over at Ares. Both Malcolm and Luke just nodded along, agreeing with her. At this point, all evidence pointed at Ares quite explicitly. Ares, in his anger, flared his power and ripped apart the watery bindings. I did not steal your damn tree, Mom. He shouted, making the whole mountain vibrate. Fine, I had the stupid lightning bolt and helmet, but I didn't steal your tree. Truthfully, they never actually expected Ares to even admit that much. And it was enough of a shock that they were now looking back at the kids. Ares held up a hand, pointing at Ocean Song. That brat right there, his pet fisher would ever just drop the damn thing on me out of nowhere. Hera's icy gaze once more landed on Ocean Song. And once more, the entire room became eerily silent. I swear on the river Styx that I did not steal the tree, and I don't know how the tree was stolen, and I had no hand in the tree being stolen. Ocean Song said with a completely straight face. Another boom overhead indicated the oath was accepted. And just as quickly, they heard the familiar goddess voice. Truth. Ares' jaw slowly opened. You. A large hand came flying downwards at him, smacking him through his throne and through the floor, out of the mountain itself. The gods all watched as Hera smacked Ares across the country. She gently got up from her own throne. Please excuse me for a moment, I must go discipline my son. She said as she disappeared. At this point, all the gods in the room now fully believed Ares was responsible. All of them were not at all suspecting Ocean Song with his very detailed oath and confirmation by goddess Styx. All the gods except for one. Hestia, who was tending to the hearth, gave him the flattest look possible without saying anything. Ocean Song pretended not to see anything. Instead, he let what remained of his robes billow heroically, in triumph. For he had invoked the most important tool of any true cultivator. Bullshitting. Line break. And like that, the lightning thief ends, probably, somehow. And there are absolutely no loose ends, none whatsoever. If you want to read one chapter ahead or support me, visit my page AStoryForOne. I also have a boosty if you can't use the above under the same name. Chapter 53. Despite the absence of two of the major gods, the room had eased considerably. In fact, if it weren't crass, they would definitely be celebrating as the god of war was currently getting spanked, maybe even literally, by the Queen of Gods. They didn't actually know what was happening to him right now, but they could feel the tremors and shockwaves from the other side of the country. Simply, none of them were brave enough to try and peek while Hera was currently venting. Now that everything is settled, Zeus waved his hand, collecting his lightning bolt, and the tree landed behind Hera's throne for safekeeping. We can move on to other matters. The King of Gods looked at the Cyclops, standing before him. He was not unaware of who he was, having thrown lightning at him not that long ago. He said he would remember the monster's name, and he didn't lie. He was somewhat conflicted. On one hand, it was someone who dared challenge him, survived, and now stood before him without any fear. On the other, he respected the young monster for his audacity and courage. Among many domains, he was the god of justice, and there would be no justice in striking down someone when he agreed to not pursue matters after what happened. That played back to his oddly good impression of Ocean Song. Daring to accept punishment, so forthrightly and head-on without hesitation. Frankly, in his mind, if more of his fellow gods' children were like this, then there would be a lot fewer problems that arose because of their progeny. And now, this same monster had solved the problem that had been plaguing Olympus and nearly started a war. What the hell did he do to himself? Before Zeus could state what matters those were, Apollo interjected. I didn't say anything with Hera around, but seriously, this is the weirdest kid I've ever seen of yours, uncle. He was, of course, referring to Poseidon and Ocean Song in this scenario. Everyone there wasn't oblivious to the very strange Cyclops standing in their chamber, they just had more tact than to be so blunt about it. I wasn't aware we have new lesser gods. Demeter added. I thought they were supposed to be introduced when they appear. It wasn't accusatory in her tone, simply confusion. That's usually what happens. Hermes nodded. Is he even a god, though? It's all weird. No, he's definitely not a god, I think. Apollo was confused just as much. I mean, I gave him some healing when I did the other kids, but I had put a lot more oomph into it, like far beyond a mortal's amount. That is to say, Ocean Song's eyes had been healed thanks to the god of healing. This lowly Cyclops thanks the great god Apollo for the healing. Ocean Song clasped his hands and bowed politely. Once more, the sincere gratitude and politeness did win a bit of favorability with the gods present. If not for the fact that the kids were, honestly intimidated into silence by the presence of the gods now that the adrenaline wore off, they would probably have also quickly done the same. But for them, being in the presence of so many godly entities, it was heavy, and it made it hard to speak if they weren't directly called on. Ah, he's cute. Aphrodite cooed. And his little crush is just so sweet, I can practically taste it seeping off him. Even Athena was furrowing her brow at the enigma in front of her. He clashed with Ares, that isn't something a mortal is capable of. She reasoned, despite being unsure herself. Yeah, but every time I look at him, trying to see his domain or divine nature, it's just him. Apollo pointed out. Ocean Song just smiled silently as he listened to them argue. My son isn't a god. Poseidon interjected. I would know if he was, I would have felt the sea inside of him. Though, even Poseidon was kind of confused, as he hadn't checked in on his strangest son in a while, and there had been significant changes. Silence. Zeus raised his hand, making everyone quiet themselves. It's clear he is not a lesser god. The goodwill Zeus had towards Ocean Song in this moment shined through. Let us begin with rewards for their completion of the quest. Though many of them still wanted to ask questions about the strange Cyclops and the fact that he felt like a lesser god despite not being one, they held their tongues at Zeus's command. But that isn't to say they were going to ignore it forever. Gods didn't rush, and they didn't get anxious. If they wanted something, they could wait for long periods if needed. To the gods, rewards were important. More than assuaging their pride in rewarding their minions for a job well done. It was the other side of the coin when it came to worship. Mortals worship the gods, and in return, when merit is achieved, the gods reward their worshippers. It was the oldest contract in existence, written in blood and ichor. Athena, start with your children. Zeus gave his daughter the floor. Athena smiled good-naturedly towards the mortals. Her divine presence was lowered to accommodate them as she stepped off her throne. Annabeth, you've done well. She approached her daughter. Speak, what reward do you desire? Annabeth was startled at being called out so suddenly. However, she wasn't easily flustered when her will hardened. See, can I have access to any of the architecture writings or works that are kept on Olympus? No one immediately raised a voice of rejection. A daughter of Athena requesting knowledge was something they expected, and it was innocent enough in the kind of forbidden knowledge she requested. Obviously, things kept on Olympus were kept out of mortals' reach. But wanting to study specifically architecture, none of the gods there cared to say a word of complaint. Athena smiled. A good request, I will see to it that you can peruse the architecture wing of the great library of Olympus at your leisure. Annabeth beamed happily at being acknowledged by her mother. Malcolm, the goddess of wisdom, turned her attention to her son. I admit, I'm surprised to see you here as well. You haven't been in camp long, but it appears that you have gained much. She cast him an evaluating gaze mixed with confusion. She could tell that his power was startlingly higher than Annabeth's, despite her viewing Annabeth as the child of hers that she placed the most hope on this century. What do you want for your reward? She finally asked, not wanting to dwell on it for too long in public. Malcolm thought for a moment. He wasn't like Annabeth, who wanted knowledge, though a small part of him wanted something similar, but his mind was settled on something else. Can I have permission to leave camp whenever I want? And also permission to take to the skies without having to pray or make a sacrifice every time? Malcolm stated. The latter half was towards Zeus. He was, knowingly, protective of his domain. Even the children of his favored sons and daughters often had a bad time if they ascended to the sky without permission. Usually, you had to make a sacrifice to Zeus so he wouldn't shoot down your plane if you were a known quantity to the gods. Malcolm wanted to be able to take a plane ride without any worry of divine temperaments. That, and after seeing his teacher flying around, he figured it was best to get the permission sorted for his own future. As for the first part, that was a bit more ambiguous. Technically, any demigods were allowed to leave camp whenever they wanted. However, they weren't allowed to. The rules say that demigods are only allowed to leave when given permission by Chiron or the gods or on a quest. If you manage to sneak out, you get punished quite heavily. If that didn't stop you from continuing to break the rules, then getting kicked out permanently wasn't something unknown. It was a direct insult to the gods. They, graciously, created this safe haven for demigods, and then said demigods just run away like it's a prison, and then they get offended and revoke the privilege. Malcolm simply wanted to be able to come and go without getting in trouble. He knew that he was still weak and needed a safe haven, but he also wanted his freedom. Athena was caught off guard by his request. It was far beyond what she expected one of her children to ask for. Granted. Zeus's voice boomed. Despite all the rules involved, it was a simple enough request for Zeus to grant. He was neither offended nor cared about it in particular. The demigod asked, therefore, his pride wasn't challenged. Athena frowned slightly but reined in his small bit of displeasure, not opting to say another word to her son. She turned her attention to Luke next. Luke Castellan, son of Hermes. What do you desire for a reward? Luke furrowed his brow because he honestly didn't know what he wanted. Though, something Malcolm said did resonate with him. I also want permission to leave camp whenever I want. The idea of being able to leave and do other things without question was something he hadn't considered before. And I want the Hermes cabin expanded. It's already cramped and overflowing to the point where we don't even have enough beds. He glanced towards Hermes, but the god's expression was somewhat neutral in return. Hermes just nodded. That's fine for me. Pops. Granted. Zeus nodded. Once more, it was something utterly minuscule in the king of God's eyes, so he happily granted these kinds of requests where he didn't have to do anything. Athena's attention didn't turn to Percy or Tyson. Instead, it settled on Lyra, who was hiding behind Ocean Song. And whose child is this? She gestured to her. Was she involved? Ocean Song put a hand on her head to calm her with all those gazes turned to her now. This is Lyra, child of Hecate. This one was escorting her across the country to arrive safely at camp. Athena just nodded, filing that information away, but no longer caring about the young demigod. Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. What do you want for your reward? She moved on to the next. Poseidon sat up straighter. The obvious look of pride was noticed by everyone. Can you set my mom up somewhere nice? And make it so she doesn't have to work anymore? Percy asked. Perhaps the most mundane request from everyone so far. It essentially came down to, can you make my mom rich? Which was extremely simple for any of the gods present. Zeus, if it's all right with you, I can handle this one. Poseidon spoke up. Zeus nodded. Very well, this request is granted. The unspoken agreement that Poseidon would have a slight hand involved. Zeus wasn't unaware of this either, but his silence was tacit approval to allow Poseidon to spend some time with his child. Percy smiled happily. Next, Athena walked towards the left to where Tyson was standing. Another child of Poseidon. Introduce yourself to the Council of Gods. Hello, I'm Tyson. Tyson said awkwardly, perhaps childishly too. The innocence in his tone wasn't lost on any of them either. No one called him out on his impolite way of greeting. They could all see that he was still but a child. And he was here after helping solve the problem that loomed over their heads. They weren't going to make it hard on him. That, and Poseidon's stern gaze on every god present, made them not want to offend the god of the seas for something so small. Tyson, my son. Poseidon addressed him. Dad. Tyson seemed unsure of what to do or say. Ocean Song put a hand on Tyson's shoulder. Junior brother, greet our father. Oh. Tyson smiled and remembered what they practiced. I, Tyson, greet you, honored father. He clasped his hands and bowed towards the god of the seas. Poseidon, bemused, was happy all the same. No need for that, son. Tell me, what do you want for a reward? Tyson looked around, clearly confused and not sure what to ask for. If I may interject on his behalf, father. Ocean Song stepped up again. He's still young, an offer of such grace is something he probably has yet to understand. May I request a reward on his behalf, if it's acceptable by the great gods present? No one seemed particularly against it. And plenty of them did want to finish up sooner rather than later. Speak. Zeus answered, gesturing for him to continue. My junior brother is a genius in the art of forging and crafting. I request that my junior brother be given lessons by the greatest master craftsman, the great god Hephaestus. He spoke politely. Lessons. Hephaestus spoke up for the first time this evening. He didn't speak much unless things directly concerned him. In fact, his mind was elsewhere the entire time, thinking about back at his forge and certain things he left to attend this meeting. A little Cyclops, huh? Is that sword on your back forged by you? Let me see it. He didn't give Tyson a chance to respond as the sword was pulled from his back by an invisible force and floated towards the god of the forge as he inspected it. Not bad. He praised. I can see some things that can be fixed, though. But that's mostly from the lack of experience. If I had to guess, he's been forging for less than a year. Less than a month, great god. Ocean Song responds. Hephaestus raised an eyebrow, stroking his chin. He has talent. Sure, I'll give him some private lessons. Tyson's eyes clearly lit up. Then it's settled. Zeus had no qualms about that either. Another member under his umbrella capable of crafting fine works, which just benefited him either way. Now, that just leaves you. All eyes then turned to Ocean Song. Son of Poseidon. The king of gods' voice held a different authority as he called upon Ocean Song. You returned my lightning bolt, my brother's helmet of darkness, and Hera's golden apple tree. Not only that, but you prevented a war over a misunderstanding and found the culprit, whom you fought on behalf of Olympus. What is it you desire? If the others had enough merit to be rewarded by the gods, then Ocean Song's merit was enough to be rewarded several times over. This lowly Cyclops requests permission to speak, great god king. Zeus, of course, was always happy to be praised and deferred to in such a way. Speak openly. First, this one has a presumptuous request. My sect has been built, but some matters still need construction. I request at a later date that I may ask this council to bestow their individual blessings upon my sect when requested. There was a silence that then overcame the room. You want our blessings. Zeus's words weren't loud, but they carried a heavy weight. We do not give out blessings lightly. In fact, most gods weren't quite enthused about being forced to give out blessings as a reward. It was something more intimate, something each god possessed that was theirs. It straddled the line of improper. May I give an example of what I desire, great God? If it is improper, then please ignore this request of mine. Ocean Song noticed the tense atmosphere. Explain then. Zeus said with his lips threatening a frown. For instance, I would request the great god Hephaestus to give his blessing to the forge at my sect. Another example, I wish to establish a garden, and I would request the great goddess Demeter's blessing upon it. Ocean Song explained. Almost immediately, the room lit up. It was significantly less demanding than they anticipated. A god giving a blessing was no small matter. A god's blessing could turn a mortal into something even a demigod couldn't contend with. Simply blessing a specific spot or room. That was worthy of a request but far below the threshold of inappropriate that they had first assumed. Granted. Zeus answered for everyone there. You spoke of something else, continue. Zeus knew that his actions demanded a bit more. Ocean Song cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically bashful. May this lowly Cyclops make a presumptuous request to build a Hecate cabin at the camp. Several gods raised an eyebrow at his request. However, compared to them, one god out of the bunch was much more excited. Aphrodite let out a squeal at the cuteness. Line break. Ocean Song flew on his sword back to the sect with Tyson next to him. Everything had been settled. Lyra went with Percy and the others to go back to camp. He promised to come visit soon, but apparently, he had to request permission to appear since he wasn't a demigod in the normal sense, and it had to be approved by Chiron. But everything ended up well. Sure, the sect was going to be missing the main proponent of the sect protecting array, but he'd think about a solution later. It's not like the array had been set up yet. He knew that fellow Taoist Daedalus was still working on the preliminary sketches. Ocean Song touched down, and everyone seemed to gather immediately. Medusa, Daedalus, Mel, and Nessie, of course. Your sect master has returned, fellow Taoists. Ocean Song was announced. And I bring good news and bad news. Which do you wish to hear first? Does it have anything to do with the commotion? Medusa asked. Yes. Ocean Song nodded. Good news first. Daedalus stated. I'm probably going to have to test this body's alcohol tolerance after I hear the bad news. The good news is that I defeated Ares in combat and fulfilled a quest and was rewarded by Olympus. Therefore, I petition to have the gods give their blessings each at our discretion. Silence. There is a lot to unpack there. Medusa held her hand up. You fought the god of war. Yes. And you're alive. I won. Ocean Song pointed out. Technically, he won. But a win is a win. Right. Medusa said dryly, only believing parts of what he said. I'll contemplate this later. And what's the bad news then if apparently fighting a god was the good news? We're at war with Amazon. Ocean Song said plainly. Quote. Medusa didn't know how to respond to that. The company or the Society of Women? Daedalus asked. Yes. Ocean Song answered. There was a moment where Daedalus had a realization of what Ocean Song meant. Are you telling me that the actual company named Amazon is run by the Amazons? He asked incredulously. Ocean Song just shrugged. How? Medusa questioned. How did you incite a war with the Amazons? Quote. Their sect master wouldn't take no for an answer. Ocean Song's eyes darted from side to side. On a completely unrelated note, I have these to pass out. He set down the pallets of goods he had stolen and subsequently stored them in his storage pouch until now. They all stared at the very clearly marked boxes with the Amazon logo. Before another question could be asked, a hand seemed to reach out from the void, grip Ocean Song by the collar, and pull him back in a burst of mist. Ocean Song blinked and found himself thrown onto the floor of his sect master's quarters, not far away from where he was a moment ago. He saw who had pulled him here. Great goddess. He greeted Hecate happily. However, she returned his greeting with a kick. What did you do? She demanded, kicking him some more. Ocean Song was on the ground, being kicked by the goddess of magic. Though, admittedly, each of the kicks was about the equivalent of being hit by a pillow. Why is it that I get messages that apparently I now have the right to construct a cabin at the demigod's camp? She raised her voice. And why is it that the goddess of love apparently strongarmed the other gods into agreeing? Ocean Song too was surprised by how aggressive Aphrodite was in getting the other gods to agree. Do you know what it means that I have a cabin now? It's basically a big sign that I'm proclaiming myself their equal. I just thought you deserved it. Ocean Song responded. Hecate paused in her kicking. He looked at her with a warm smile. You're equal in my eyes, great goddess. Hecate's lips trembled slightly, and with a huff, she kicked him one last time, surprisingly, even gentler than before. With a scowl, she grabbed his collar and pulled him up until their faces were level, and she, without hesitation, kissed him. The kiss lasted for several moments before she unceremoniously dropped him back onto the ground. Thank you for bringing my daughter home safely. She said softly with a distinct note of warmth in her voice. Ocean Song watched as she disappeared as quickly as she had appeared originally. He stood up, brushing himself off. He walked out to the balcony that overlooked the sect, and he clasped his hands behind his back as his robes billowed despite no strong winds present. Deciding to be a cultivator was definitely the best decision I ever made. I really didn't think it would turn out this well. Line break. A.N. And thus ends the first book, or something along those lines. Canon is already pretty fucked, so it's hard to really say. If you want to read one chapter ahead or support me, visit my page AStoryForOne. I also have a boosty if you can't use the above under the same name.